Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Science of Superpowers. So delighted to have you with us and really, really delighted to share today's guest with you. We have Paul Selig on the show again. Paul, welcome again to the Science of Superpowers.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're so glad to have you joining us, particularly for this particular feature as the Superpower Network celebrates the men of co-creation. Men who have dedicated their existence to the pursuit of something beyond themselves in areas like science, business, medicine, personal development, religion, family, relationship, and many others. These men have stepped up and said yes to co-creating a world that aims to inspire all of us. Thank you for modeling admirable character and honorable pursuits. We love you. Love each other, folks. These are the people who are saying yes to our future, to the bigness of who we are, to believing in ourselves to be bigger than what we're portraying, and remembering that we don't have to be afraid, right? We don't have to be afraid of our own power. We don't have to be afraid of anything that we're facing, because when we remember that we're capable of co-creation, the miraculous can occur in every moment. And that's what we're talking about today. Today's conversation is all around Paul Selig and Tonya Dawn Recla. That's us guiding humanity into co-creation and what we mean by that. And so, Paul, the reason why you're at the top of our list of a man to celebrate in terms of co-creation is because you have selflessly dedicated yourself to allowing these messages to come through you in your works, in your books, in your talks. And from the first moment that somebody introduced your work to me, I felt the humbleness with which you were approaching this, right? The humility, the willingness to be transparent. And it was inspiring. It was inspiring to know that you were allowing your own questions and your own doubts and your own, like, whoa, hold on, as your reality is getting shaped and shifted for all of us to watch. And I so appreciated that, as a contrast to some of the other examples that I was seeing. How did you step into that place first and foremost to say, I'm going to willingly put my life, my beingness, my growth, my development on display through these voices that are sometimes kind of harsh, like, okay, Paul has a question, they're not mincing words, right? But the truth and the power and the essence of what comes through is so beautiful. What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, it's been a process from the beginning. This isn't something that I thought I would be doing. I wasn't somebody who necessarily even believed in channeling. My clairaudience or ability to channel was developed by accident. I was doing energy healing. I was a college teacher, so I had a real life, but during the AIDS epidemic, I studied a form of energy healing, and I was volunteering at a center for people, and I started to hear things for them. So my hearing has always been in service to other people. And it still is, really. It's not about me. And I think of myself in this work as a radio more than anything else, And sometimes I used to say the radio doesn't always get to dance to the music, but, that's changed as I've allowed myself to be in this process more and more and more. But I was doing this for a very long time and very, very quietly. I had a group that met in my apartment for 18 years. People would put $10 in a basket, and that was great. And I could get a pizza at the end of the night, and that made me happy. But I did this work because I was so fascinated by it. I wasn't trying to be in service to anybody, really. When I started that group, I wanted to share the experience of being in the energy because that validated the information that I was getting. And the information that I was getting was really secondary to me, to the experience of the vibrational shifts that would happen in the room. I mean, it was nuts. All this energy would come and we'd all be feeling it. The guy would say, we're putting a hand on everybody's forehead, and we'd all go back. It was like Beetlejuice. It was nutty. And I just loved that because I think I needed the confirmation, and perhaps I still do. I have to have an active listener present for my work. Initially, for the first 3 books or so, there was somebody on the phone and I was recording, but I had to have an active listener. Now, I think the last 7 books or so were all done in front of live audiences, and I don't transcribe anymore. We just send the video off and it's done. But I often say that it's done this way because if I'm doing the dishes and I start hearing something I don't want to hear, I'm going to say thank you very much and shut it off or just shift my attention. So if there's an active listener, then I am kind of honor bound to continue the sentence. And the transparency you speak of, I'm an old time 12 stepper. I came into a spiritual life when I fell basically through the floor into a spiritual life. It wasn't something that I was seeking, but I hit a wall. And I learned a little bit at that time that, I had a great therapist, Hurricane Harriet Warfield. She was a knockout when I was like in my late 20s. Somebody dropped me on her doorstep, and she was a tough old broad. She smoked 120 cigarettes and had a platinum blonde dye job, and she was like an ex-rockette. And she said to me, get spiritual, get spiritual. And then she said, people who got the higher power aren't running around talking about it. They don't have to. And I found that to be true. When everybody announces themselves as enlightened, I get a little cautious around that. And I often say that, my experience of seeing people who were evolved, or in my opinion, weren't the people with the $1,000 crystals. They were the people teaching in the South Bronx for very little money, and they were loving their students and what they did. And that, to me, that's the real stuff. And so my transparency really is just a product of this. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm not ascended. I do my best. I show up as best I can. And my life has transformed in wonderful ways as a result of this. And that I have to be grateful for. And I do think that that's the product of showing up again and again and again. And this is where I do agree with you, again and again and again, even when I don't want to. I mean, I remember having to put my dog to sleep, who was my great companion. This is an old dog, not the dog that may wander in the background of this. And then having to do a live stream, right after, or right after I lost a friend. And the guides come through regardless. And what I like about this is that those experiences remind me that it's not me. Because it's the last thing I want to talk about is trust or faith. And then they come through. But, so that's the story. It's not. I did a podcast once with somebody who said, oh, wow, humility, that's really interesting. I should try that one on, as if it's something that tries on. And I blew my mind. But
like a pal.
Well, it's just, or another mask that one can wear. And I think anybody that's really doing this work probably understands that specialness can be a trap. And we all do have these abilities, and they are available to us. They really are. And some of it is claiming them as our inherent birthright. And then some of them is remembering the source of them, which is not my personality and my ego. My personality and my ego can't channel. Somebody once said to me, try to channel right now, because I said, how do I know this isn't, it's just me? Tried it. I couldn't do it. Nothing came out. It's like the radio's playing or it's not playing, or it's playing my station or the guide station, like being under a shower head. You feel it or it's not there. You can't try to get wet in the shower. You're either getting wet or you're not.
Beautiful. I remember asking a similar question, and somebody said to me, they're like, here's the deal. Like, the crazy person never asks themselves if they're crazy. So as long as you're questioning it, you're probably still okay. Like, okay, all right, cool. I can work with that. Because we need our little anchors, right? Our reality checks, if you saw Inception, like our little tops to spin, because we're playing with things that are, not molecular in structure. They're not physical. They supersede the reality that most of our programs would have us believing in. And so you do kind of need from time to time the accountability. Like, I love you that you speak about the active listener. It does allow for this sort of, where two or more of you gather, there also will I be. And it's kind of like, and if two or more of you aren't gathered, you might want to check in with who, what voices are coming through, because there's this beautiful reflection that when you learn to work with it, we start to see how this concept of you are me and I am you, and how we can work in the abstract and the symbolic with each other, really is a beautiful gift. And to be able to have that experience through that connection with the guides models for all of us sort of this co-creative element when we choose to align with that source. Real quickly, before we get any further into it, let's make sure that we're letting people know where they can go to find out more about you. PaulSelig.com, is that the best place?
The best place, yes.
Brilliant. Perfect. I wanted to make sure that we got that in there. And then you were gonna kind of add on to what I was saying there. Go ahead.
I don't recall what I don't recall. I'm
Beautiful.
sorry.
No worries. I realized that we kind of ran through that thread. And so one of the questions that came up for me as you were speaking was do you have a relationship with the guides when you're not channeling in your kind of experience?
Yeah, I do, but it's different. They're teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, the agreement is I show up, I step out of the way, they come through, and they're very consistent. When I'm doing the first voice I heard, just in terms of other than the voice that told me to get my act together and stop, taking substances, was like when I was getting ready to go to work one day at NYU. I was teaching, and I'm a slob, and I had, and I heard I said, what should I, to myself, what do I wear today? And I heard, wear the blue shirt. And that surprised me. And it was the only thing that was pressed and probably didn't have a mustard stain down the front, but I wore it, and I actually was asked to go and meet with my boss that day. So it was like, oops, I'm glad I wore the blue shirt.
Mm.
And I found that I don't get instruction personally unless I ask. But I tend to be cautious around
Mhm.
listening to, well, they don't override free will. That's really what it's
Mhm.
about. They're not saying, go to Denver and speak to the people. I don't get that. I go, should I go to Denver? Good idea.
Mhm.
That I
So
might,
in essence, yeah, so in essence, it's like in those moments you become the active listener.
very much
Um,
so. Yeah, very
what I
much.
find, the kind of how it got explained to me in my space when I was asking those questions, it was like, okay, so the teachings that I receive inside of myself are very custom, right? They're very specific, very unique, like symbolic threads that would make no sense to anybody else. But I'm like, oh yeah, of course. This is just like da 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 da. And my husband looks at me like I'm nuts. I'm like, you don't see the connection? And it's like, no, because it's in my worldscape, right?
Yeah,
It's in my mapping, it's my voice, my narrative. And those are incredibly helpful. What I find is that they're not so helpful necessarily in the
no,
translation, which is, we see spiritual greats really careful about what they're using as universal teachings because we have all kinds of conceptualization that occurs in terms of how we understand words. And so then there's a differentiation between how messages are delivered on math versus internally. And that tells us two things. It tells us one, there's this check and balance system, which is really beautiful, that if we adhere to it, it's a really beautiful accountability for those of us who choose to walk this path. And I recommend walking that, right? Learning that delicate balance
mhm,
for those of you who are interested. It also tells us that we have the potential to learn really rapidly inside of ourselves if we willingly cultivate the ability to become active listeners.
no,
And that's a huge hint, right? That's a very cute, cool clue for how we can program ourselves to consider ourselves in really different ways than perhaps we have before, right? Which is where the superpower body of work comes in. Solving for human conditioning, the human condition in co-creative environments. What's keeping us from our natural state of existence, right? What are the programs that are telling us otherwise? And so when we can break that and say, hey, hold on, I actually do think I can figure this out, or I can find the information without asking Siri, right? I believe kind of this concept is training us for how to ask questions to the field. And the field relationship is one of responsiveness. It's one of
mhm,
agreements. It's one of, to your point, when you agree to show up consistently, the field it's almost like the field knows how to move everything because you said you'll be there. So it's like, okay, cool. Then I can align this person who needs this person, and the further out we're willing to hold agreements and containers with each other and with the field, the more miraculous the happenings are because the more precise the threadings can be under the surface. And so our commitment to self, learning that self-discipline, and our commitment to each other in co-creative spaces is what allows us to harness co-creative principles, right? And so once we can kind of break that down, it's like, oh, well, we can use this, right? But what I love how you're speaking to this is the question early on that I got asked the most is like what you were saying, how do I know if it's my ego or if it's my intuition or if it's God or if it's whatever we want to call that? And the way you journeyed and how you described it was so beautiful. First, you be real cautious about who's listening and who's talking, and you start stepping out of yourself and going, okay, who's listening, who's talking, who am I in this, right? And you got to be willing to sort of be shaped and molded in different
Absolutely.
ways on this journey, right? And I'd imagine you look in the mirror sometimes and go like, who, what, where did I start this whole thing, right? Because you've changed and morphed so many times between here and there.
Yeah. I was fortunate to have people in my life, and I still do, that do this kind of work. And so early on, I had some mentors, and I had, I learned pretty early on that discernment was important here. And I learned that just because somebody's not walking around in a body doesn't necessarily mean they have something, helpful to say. And so,
I love that.
it's all about, when I use the radio model, it's about the station I'm turning into. And I find that for people that are just opening up, that the traps can be specialness. I'm being told that I'm here to save the world and I'm the only one here to save the world. Thank you very much, which is the ego, being appropriated. So flattery, I tend to be cautious about. And also people that are getting fear-based messages that are all about separation and condemnation. I don't think the guys that I work with are teachers. I don't think they care who or what if Princess Di was murdered. I don't think that that's their agenda, with us. I think it's much higher. And it's not that people can't be operating at that level of psychic ability and getting very valid and supportive information. But I think that when one is being developed through the experience. And the biggest caution I always have for myself is I have to be careful that I'm not hearing what I want to hear.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And I've spoken to people, well, I have a soulmate and he or she doesn't know it yet, but we're going to be together. And I go, oh, brother, what a trap that is.
Right after they drink this potion.
Pretty much. And so it hasn't worked that way for me. And I don't know about other people. And it's really not my place to decide what's right for other people and how other people develop. It took me a long time. And that was just consistency, I think.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
still
you're much kinder than we are in that space, much more gentle. We've been swimming around in those spaces, and I come from the critical race theory world and the due diligence counter intel world. So I tend to take a little bit of a harder line with being responsible with what we're sharing with people. We're talking about lives. We know people who've taken their lives because of really poorly utilized abilities that people just don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of the reason why we decided to be very, very transparent and open in this work, was that people are messing around with it anyway.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, we might as well be studying it. We might as well be talking about it in some sort of adult, responsible fashion. And our take on it was, if we don't, then we're going to start to see regulations in these arenas. We would rather be positioned to inform those regulations or preferably to avoid them. We'd rather see market responsibility, to be honest with you, because it just makes sense as a humanity that we would say, hold on, like, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And if somebody hasn't processed through their subconscious programs and they don't understand themselves all the way down to those roots and know how to clear that in a second, they're susceptible to their own interpretations. And that's very dangerous to offer up to somebody else as their own truth. But here's the deal, folks. Here's what's so brilliant. You don't have to be afraid of that. Like, you can go on your journeys and stuff, because each one of us is equipped to be able to know truth for ourselves. We have the ability to gauge our own resonance. The guides have been incredibly clear on this from book one. This is an innate power we all have. If you don't want to be influenced by others, if you don't want to be manipulated by others, you can keep asking them to stop or demanding that they stop, but you can't control them. All you can do is learn how to strengthen yourself so you're not susceptible. And when you do, you're untouchable. Now you're free to move through the world, influencing the world rather than feeling constantly influenced by it. Exercise those abilities. If you don't know how, go to Superpower Experts to find out. You have the ability, but we're happy to help you train it, right? Like, that's fine. Read Paul's books. They're happy to help you awaken it, right? The guides are the essence of love. It's not sweet talk. It's not the super sexy stuff. It's not pop a pill and you're going to be a millionaire. This is how you walk the path to get what you really want. And it's really worth it. And I believe that that's, Paul gets to sit here now, however many years later, and say, yeah, like magical things happen. Like, not to put words in your mouth, but also that's what happened in our space, right? Literally, the miraculous occurs in every moment we choose to shine. And it doesn't mean that we paste a fake smile on our faces. It means we remember who we are. And when we do that, we remember we're creators, and ultimately we're in the expression and the experience of ourselves. Done and done. So we get to just be in that and play together and accept that it's going to be messy from time to time, and we're going to do science, and it's going to explode in our faces, and we're going to clean it up, and we're going to try again. That's my shtick. Paul, I adore you. I so appreciate your work. We love that you're willing to continuously show up, to be the active listener in your own life so that you can show up on behalf of all of us and to allow the rest of us to be active listeners. What are some final thoughts? What would you like to leave people with about this walk, about the guidance, about looking forward?
I mean, had I decided what everything should be and have it cohere with my idea of who I was, I would be very, very, very unhappy. And I learned it the hard way. I learned about allowing, through realizing that my demands often were based in an old structure of who I thought Paul was supposed to be, based on a world that decides who people should be and how they should look and all those things. So I have to say, trust your own path and let it unfold. Let it unfold. Let it unfold like flagstones. You can walk as they just appear before you. It's so much better than sort of mandating how everything should be, because that's the old self wanting to perpetuate history. And I hear that the divine self, or the true self, or the truth of who we all are, knows itself beyond that, which is much more exciting.
Beautiful, beautiful. Absolutely. And the unfoldment is so delicious. It is worth it, folks. You get to have the experience of what we call a sensational life, which is satiation at all of our sensory levels, right? The ability to experience creation in its fullest at every layer that we're capable of staying awake for, right? It's truly a delightful journey, and well worth taking your time and getting to know yourself. And it's much easier when you're walking with others and opening your heart and loving others. So check out Paul's work at paulselig.com. It really does. It's like a warm hug. You sit in there and go, when nothing else in the world makes sense, just go listen to Paul, right? Listen to his books. It really is a blessing to all of us to have that to fall back on. Get over to Superpower Network. You can check us out on YouTube. If you're needing to consume something that's not programming you in something diminishing, and you just can't get there on your own, nature's not doing it, meditation's not doing it, then lean into those who are holding these containers open to remind you just how brilliant you are. And then get back on your track, right? We're here with a Band-Aid and a hug and a smack on the butt on the way back out the door. This is your journey. Live it. Turn your lifetime journey into the journey of a lifetime, folks. Go to superpowerexperts.com to find out more about how we do that, and make sure that you are expressing your creative self in every moment. Paul, thank you so much for joining us and for being a celebrated man of co-creation. We love you. We love the work you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Beautiful. And to all of you out there, thank you for your continued support of the network, and continue to shine on. Remember who you are. Until next time, love yourselves, love each other. We love you. Goodbye for now.